talk about the people impacted by this storm as your neighbors, the more aligned your actions will be with that kind of a relationship, because that's where you want to end up. Neighbors, committed to one another, invested in one another. So guests and neighbors. And creating a welcoming place means showing people to their cot with the meager belongings as if they were checking into a hotel. Treating them always with dignity, and never forgetting their humanity, never losing sight of how easily the places could be exchanged, you and them. I saw y'all do this. Immediately after that survival phase is done, now the chaos begins. And it broke my heart to watch y'all go through that. I knew it was coming, and I knew how hard it was going to be. The biggest challenge you faced, which is similar to one we faced in Harvey, was the number of volunteers and people showing up to help was entirely unmanageable. Because everybody looking at the screen felt for you and said, there must be something I can do, and poured into the community. They didn't neatly spread themselves out over the next 12 months that you would need them. They just all came at once. And then you were forced to try to figure out what to do with them and yourselves and the people most impacted. And this is also a stage that generates enormous conflict, because what is immediately happening is there's a huge collision between our expectations of help and what help actually looks like. Between our expectations of organizations and institutions and systems of help and what they can actually do, and with what speed. So if you've lived this stage, you've had some intense feelings. This is also the stage where everybody outside the area feels free to tell your story. They make up shit about you. Oh, I didn't check if I could say shit here, but I have a theory that if you've ever done any disaster work and you don't swear, you aren't working. Because, it just comes with the job. But people make up stories about you. They tell about how it's going, what you're doing, whether you know what you're doing, whether it's working, what you did with the money, what you should have done with the money, what you ought to be doing. Done it better, anticipated something unimaginable and prepared for it like 10 years ago before you were born. And so while this is going on, this is incredibly painful, because you're at a time when you're most vulnerable and you most need to be understood. People are spinning all kinds of stories that make no sense. I mean, I can dial back to Katrina in New Orleans, and being in New Orleans and having to be with people as the media wrote story after story after story. It just hurt like hell for people trying to craft their way forward. Hurt like hell to hear this. And they worked all the way through it, just as all of you did. And it's incredibly important to remember, reality's on the ground, always, not in the headlines. You have to make the headlines that you want to have read, and you share them amongst yourselves, because that's the way you keep one another encouraged in this work. You cannot wait for someone else to tell your story. You must be your own storytellers. How this will be remembered is not from the headline, it'll be from you. It'll be the stories you tell about your colleagues and coworkers and the circle of people in this room, and the long-term recovery group, and every single table at which you sit to figure out how to move forward. Those are the stories that matter. I have a friend that did some intense work in Rwanda after genocide, and encountering a group of women had formed their own small community who seemed very happy. She asked them, how can you seem so happy in the face of everything that's happened? And they said to her, we were together, I forget the rest. And I will say to you, if you forget to be together, this is going to be much more painful than it needs to be. Be together. And then I think these systems, all of these systems, this collision of expectation is your opportunity to look at what you thought would happen and learn exactly what will and won't happen. So when people are hurting and miserable, whether it's immigration or disaster response, on. It's astonishing how similar those are. They have to present themselves to these systems to try to be deemed worthy, to produce the information, resurrect the documents, find whatever they need to prove that they're entitled to some form of investment in home when they're most vulnerable, and the stakes are very, very high. For those of you working and doing any kind of case management, helping people navigate these systems, helping people organize their information, being able to show up, and all of these systems have to be wrangled, sometimes multiples of them. That's why I appreciate the work of Connecta, because anything that can be done to make this more coherent lends itself greatly to your recovery, to your success. So I always mention the chaotic stage because the same for us at Harvey. The only unmanageable entrance to the shelter was a volunteer entrance. So I tell people, and you can too, all of those people that came, mark on your calendar 6 months, a year, show up again because they won't be done. You're in a long-term process. So then in this chaotic thing, the urge is to get control. You know, if you're leading and everything's a hot mess, you're like, I need to get control of this. I need to make this predictable. I need to make this orderly. I need to make this work. We need to try to get back to normal. And that getting back to normal thing that you carry in your head is the undoing of you. It's like being in a rushing river, refusing to let go, and your arms will be torn off. That's not how it works. I recently spoke with a mom who lost a daughter in a camp, and she said to me, but I just need to know, how will we get back to normal? And I'm like, normal is right now is just a memory, and it's off the table for getting back to. When we let go of getting back and start looking forward, that's a moment. In the meantime, allow everything that is not destructive, and I do mean everything, every harebrained, every wild ass, every kooky, every art, music, dance, all have the power to remind us of who we are when words do not suffice. There's no institution, no city, no community I've ever been in that didn't feed back to me the healing power of the arts. Because when those things are there, it settles us in a way, in our spirits in a way that nothing else can. New Orleans knew this. Building Musicians Village, getting musicians back, they knew that was important. In Germany and selling Syrians, they knew art mattered. And they not only allowed it, they encouraged it. Because that expression of who we are as human beings gets us over a lot of bridges that are hard to cross with language alone. So that was super, when I was Elena knows this story. We were working in Harvey, and we had to have a pet-friendly shelter. Now, I love people. Animals, I just feel like y'all should make it on your own, like out there. You got survival, get with it. Don't hate me for it. But they told me I had to operate a pet-friendly shelter. I was like, all right, can we just wave at them as they go by? But no, we had to have all those little useless dogs, snakes, hamsters, all kind of critters piled up in there. And then they wanted to be with their owners, so then we had these little yippy dogs at the cots. And then this group of people came in, all covered with red, white, and blue flags and such, and they wanted to do something for the people in the shelter. Well, as it turned out, what they wanted, they had a live bald eagle. A live eagle. And they were going to play, this is what they do. They play the Star Spangled Banner, and the eagle flies around and then comes back. So I said, allow everything that is not destructive, so I'm thinking I pretty much need to say yes to it. Star Spangled Banner can't hurt anybody. I guess the eagle's all, we got every other kind of critter here. It's like Noah's Ark. All right. So the strains of the Star Spangled Banner and the eagle starts to fly, and then I remember it's kind of a predator, right? And I'm looking at all these useless eagle food chain situation. Everything, it turned out no animals were harmed in the making of that joke, but then some Santa Clauses showed up, and I do think there's still some Houston children a little confused about why Santa came in August at the shelter, but we allow it all. The Texans cheerleaders came, you know, every form of celebration, every expression of our humanity in any shared form of it, allow it, encourage it, and appreciate it, because it really keeps us going. This was in a camp in a balloon shelter in Berlin where they were resettling Syrians, and there were many children there. The artist here working with them spoke only English, and none of the children spoke. There were no common languages, but grand murals were created by the children just through gestures and examples. We don't always need language to heal us. The next stage after this chaotic period, this crazy chaos, and all the conflicts that come from it, the collisions of our expectations against what's actually happening, is a kind of limbo. And the woman that made me most acquainted with this was in lower ninth, and she told me after Katrina, there was a habit after Katrina, you'd mow your lawn. You couldn't do anything else. It was an astonishing and its destructive disaster. But you mowed your lawn as a way of telling people that you were coming back or that you were there. And she talked about this period of time when she and her husband couldn't go on. And that all they could do was mow the lawn between the curb and the sidewalk. That's as much as they had the energy for. And she said, people around us were like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And she said, we didn't do anything. I felt like we... And I've witnessed this over and over again, and people drastically impacted by disasters, I've seen them go into this limbo. And those of us, like all of you in this room, are helpers, are like, hey, why aren't you responding? Or you didn't finish the application, or you didn't show up for the session, or you're not working on the repairs, or you didn't get a contract. And it's exhaustion, because finally it's landed. I'm not in my old world. And nothing I've tried to get myself back there has worked. And there's a mental and spiritual exhaustion that sets in, and it's not useless. If it goes on indefinitely, yes, we know people need help, but even therapists need to understand that hibernation is also a inner reconciliation with reality as it is now. And those of you who are helpers, if you find yourself exhausted, if you find yourself rolling up and pulling into your parking place, taking a deep breath and not wanting to get out, you're in it too. Because the size and scale of what you're doing is coming home. And you just breathe and let it land. It won't kill you. It will not. This work is internal, it's invisible. The way the external world actually enables this or enforces this in some way is bureaucracies are slow. Decision-making processes are slow and deliberative, and you really want them to be. The communities that don't take time end up so scarred and so broken that they can't call themselves a community on the other side. They prioritize speed, and they left everything else of value on the trash heap. So when you find yourself in this, you let that reality land. It usually scared of that you don't know how to do or that anger you. Today, during the day, I feel sure you're going to feel angry, you're going to feel sad, you're going to feel scared. Let it be. Let it be. There's nothing about recovery I've ever seen that requires you to not feel. Your feelings are your feelings, whatever they are. Who in here is old enough to remember Rosie Greer and Marlo Thomas doing, like, we got some old, good, Rosie Greer sang the song, it's all right to cry. And he's an enormous football player, so it was coming from, it really is all right to cry over little things, big things, whatever hurts you. So that suspended state ends because you start to realize that there's a shape that the path forward starts to take, and you can recognize it. In the meantime, this was a photograph I took I got from my brother, who took it in his backyard after because his house was in Bridge City, got 8 feet of water. And my brother, who has a Cajun sense of humor, also called and said, well, Angela, there's good news and bad news. There are a couple of fish in my living room and several stuck in my fence, and the good news is some of them are keepers. That sense of being a fish out of water, suspended, without your roots, without clarity, without a defined role going forward, allow it. It starts to come clear. During this period also is when the echoes of people that may have been forgotten, you start to hear them. Elena and I were together in Buncombe County, and this is Swannanoa. Swannanoa is outside of the city that everyone's paying attention to, and they felt like they had been forgotten. During this limbo phase is a good time to check in. Are there communities that feel forgotten? Are there people saying, I don't think anybody knows we're here? If so, the temptation, you're so overwhelmed, is to say, I can't listen to that because I'm already trying as hard as I can, and if I forgot something, this is not the time to tell me because I'm doing all I can do because this is really overwhelming. Instead, just pause. You have time. You have time to go and connect with whomever it is that's thinking, feeling, left out. Get to the bottom of that. We have a saying that buried beneath every grievance is a hoped for, longed for, better future. Just remember, when people are complaining, the other side of that is they had a hope for something. And that's the conversation you want to get to. These are a group of firefighters that responded to the Black Saturday fires in Australia. These are the people you now have solidarity with, because these were people that were having to try to rescue people in another community, not knowing their own was burning as well. All of Australia virtually is covered by volunteer firefighters, people in the community who both have the terrible job of fighting the fire, and then they have to come as well to find their neighbors who perished and deal with that. So they're very brave, and they have tons of fortitude, but they lead with their hearts. So there was a great deal of damage that came after as people tried to put themselves back together from this horrific event. Here's what helped them. The people they were most curious about when I was with them were the people in New Orleans, because they felt, as some of you do, and some of the people impacted in the Hill Country felt, like they had endured a horror so unthinkable. There was really nobody who could understand it, no one they could talk to. And bringing some of them to New Orleans was a great moment for me, because I saw people on both sides of the table who felt like they had lived through the unthinkable, and now there were people willing to listen. And sometimes the best thing we can do is be willing to be present. People ask me all the time, how do you deal with the horrible things that people tell you? I'm like, if they lived it, I can hear it. So you now belong with people who've navigated all of this before, and you are worthy of it. There comes a fork in the road, and you're probably getting fairly close to this. It's a kind of moment in which you have to make a decision. And it's not a one you get to make once. You have to make it over and over. So, and the decision is, so I'll just do one version of this. So, Galveston after Ike, so I'm there and I see this honky-tonk, dive bar, quite frankly, a place I'd probably go to. And, because, we know those are the best ones. But all the signs in Galveston were somewhere in Houston, because I had just cleaned the entire island of all the signage and dumped it across the bay. And, but they hand-lettered their sign, Hard Times and Misery Saloon. Now you can go through this entire process as if you're sitting on a stool at the Hard Times and Misery Saloon and talk about how hard it is and whine about how difficult it is and complain about how big your job is now and how terrible it is and how mean other people are and why can't they act better. And you can sit on that stool and tell that story the rest of your life. That's resignation. I cannot believe this happened to me. We see it in individuals, we see it in organizations. Oh, woe is me. You're allowed, you know, I have a 90-year-old mother that didn't put up with any sort of like whining at all. And you know, every now and then I'll call her and I'm like, I just need 30 seconds of sympathy, Mom. And the last time I did that, she told me sympathy's for dead people. So, so that's where I come from. You don't want to be that. You're not moving into the Hard Times and Misery Saloon. This is where solidarity with others matters so much. Sadly, we're not special, but you are unique in your ability to craft something going forward. So I have a thing when I go into disaster arenas and with people, I go, okay, we have to have an agreement. It's called advance forgiveness. Because I'm sure that somebody's going to do something insensitive, stupid, heartless, cruel, dumb, all the things, utterly ridiculous, something we'd never think of doing, and quite possibly is going to be me. Advanced forgiveness is what the grace we allow one another, because most of you haven't done this before, and even if you have, you're not perfect, and every community is different. Forgive them anyway. That's a very Cajun thing. We try to get an apology from the English for dumping us out of Acadia in Canada at the 250-year mark of the diaspora. And, you know, they didn't really think that was long enough, so they wouldn't say sorry. So one of my Cajun relatives from Opelousas said, well, let's just forgive them anyway and go dancing. You're going to need to do a lot of forgive them anyway. And it really rests upon your ability to assume the best in other people. They're doing their best, they're doing as well as they know how, and they're not out to get you. I've detected in this community, as I do in most, a genuine and deep-seated desire to serve one another and to do something beautiful here together. When I worked in Germany with Syrians, I said, so what is it like to be here? What is it like to rebuild your life in such a completely different place? And this woman says to me, she said, this is what fills our hearts, gratitude. We can't believe they took us in. And now I have a home here. And now I walk my child to school each day, and she has a school here. And we are so grateful. But also, every time I walk through the door of my home here, I think about the home I lost in Syria. And when I walk my child to school, I think about the path we took in Syria. And she said, I just want them to understand that our grief does not mean we're not grateful. And I've seen this over and over again. As people move through recovery, as gains are made, you may not feel the joy that you expect. And you may not even feel the relief you expect. You may just feel grief, because every single stick in the ground now is a reminder of what used to be there. Please allow that. Gratitude and grief go together at every milestone. At every milestone. And this is true for everyone. That's just part of the cycle of create, lose, destruction, create. This is the cycle. This is terms and conditions of life on this little bubble. But understand, if people are not grateful the way you think they might be for help, that's what's going on inside of them. It's not a true lack of gratitude. It's the realization of the magnitude of their loss. Now, you know, you might have detected already, you know, I love my people. You know, I come from that culture. And in New Orleans, we really know how to hold a funeral. Ritual is important. I was working with a group in which a man told me about this sort of environmental loss that's come with this destruction. He was talking about this spring that he and his friends used to go to, a place where people fell in love and, you know, lust too, apparently. It was quite an exciting place. A place you'd bring your children. It was a community sort of marker, and it's gone. And he said, what do we do? I know you hold a funeral. So the way the second line funerals are held in New Orleans, it's a sad, closer walk with the sort of hymn to the cemetery, and this raucous, wild, celebratory walk, march away. These rituals where we say goodbye to what's been lost are really important. The woman in Lower Ninth told me that on the about anniversary, about 1 year of Katrina, Lower Ninth had been stuck, really kind of unable to move on. They held a kind of ceremony at the breaks in the levee there. And people gathered, brought whatever they had of the people that were missing. And at that point, people knew they weren't coming back. And other losses, symbols to that break. And then the Terme brass band heard, they came, they played. This became a funeral, and this was the story she told me in answer to my question. At what point did you begin to feel that you could start over, that you could rebuild? And she pointed to that. She said, everything we did before that we felt guilty about. It's like we needed to be able to say goodbye in order to build something new. And please understand, it is all right to feel that way about a building or a spring or anything else that has been valuable, that has been important to community. When I went to Rolling Fork, Mississippi after that catastrophic tornado, you know, it was about a statue of a bear, and there's a long story attached to it, but none of that mattered. What really mattered is it meant something to that community, and having some sort of acknowledgement of loss in whatever way you craft that funeral matters. And you can construct those in ways that allow people not to feel guilty about moving on and creating something new. I'm going to skip this one for now. So when reckoning comes, that reckoning is when now you're not crawled up on the hard times and misery saloon. You know what you're in for. Your expectations of all the systems of help, something you thought would happen. You're past all of that thinking this is all going to be solved by somebody bigger, better, and smarter. You know it's you. You realize it's not going to be done quickly, that it's long. What happens now is we really got to double down on understanding what we have to work with. This is where a strength-based approach is not only necessary, it's essential. You can't get anywhere without it. That means looking at one another in terms of what are you bringing, what are you capable of, what can you deliver, what do you know how to do, and understanding that about one another at all times and keeping that understanding at the forefront of all the work that you do. Having that perspective and not letting yourself deviate from it. It allows you to be these weight-bearing structures, because this is heavy. What's happening in this room today with the long-term recovery group, all of the other meetings and groups that you form, it's a scaffolding that can hold the weight of this work. Because that scaffolding didn't exist. You were individuals running like hell in your own lane, doing a very fine job in your institutions. And now there has to be a scaffolding that supersedes that, something that allows you to work together. Something that allows this work to continue for the number of years it's going to take to see it through. It's important, it's all right to ask each time you gather, are you in, are you out? Because some of us perform extremely well in the acute phase. We are superstars. The more chaotic things get, the calmer I get. The more insane things are, the more clear I am about what is possible and what can be done. Now, yeah, there's problems with that, let me just tell you. But I have friends. I have a colleague, Diana, you know. Diana is this thoughtful, deliberative, organized person. She is the person that you need in the year, because that's the point where you start making up new rules for new possibilities, new outcomes. She's stellar at that. That's thoughtful, deliberative work that has to be finely knitted. She's good at it. So you're in or you out, you can come and go from this work, and that should be allowed. Let's don't condemn those people that step away. When they're ready to step back, bring them back. Can you do that? This is really important, and you need everybody, and you need them for whatever they can do. All right, rage or despair, they're very costly. When we leave people out, when we decide we can move on without a neighborhood or a community, when we believe that it's not necessary to hear certain voices because they're too loud or noisy or annoying, and we don't have an answer, this is the price we pay, rage or despair. They're both costly. So every time you're tempted to go, I just can't deal with it, add now, take a breath, and make a space for it, because it accumulates and it gets expensive. This is just something, every time someone's attacking you, every time someone's criticizing you, everyone's saying you're not doing enough, you should have done this, why aren't you doing that, didn't do that quick enough, don't have this together. Just remember, solution. What were they hoping for? What are they longing for? But the next question, because you're not meant to solve everything, is I see what you'd like to have happen. What would you be willing to do to bring it about? So you must entertain what people have to say, but you must not add it to the burden you're carrying each and every time. So do what you can with what you have where you are right now. This is very emblematic of this stage. And those people, like musicians, who walk out on the street and they put their case down, they pick up their instrument, and they start to play. They don't wait for the audience and the ticket seller and the rest. They just begin. And this is how people craft recoveries. It's the improvisation. It's also what allows you to build something new. Puerto Rico, the community developers in Puerto Rico realized no one was coming, and they realized that was going to be their current circumstance and their future. They went to ground to build a forum, and I believe Austin said something earlier. I don't want to steal anything from what he's going to say, which is really quite beautiful, but the building stronger, the building for the future, to craft something that allows you to face not only unthinkable events, but even be better in the everyday. This was their goal, and they did it on several fronts, and you can too. This building anew requires imagination, but it's crafted out of what's here. It's not the idea that someone brings for this grand scheme. You know, the people that showed up in Houston saying, oh, you know, Harvey's a great chance to make Houston more walkable. We're like, well, right now, we might just need to make it more wadeable or swimmable, but, you know, thank you for your input. So you want to build anew, but based off of the strengths that are already here, the resources here, and your deep knowledge about what matters. Feral hogs. I have to do a quick. The people that show up trying to make bank on your misery, every disaster has them. They swoop in. They're just like feral hogs. You know, we don't like those ugly critters. Even PETA doesn't take up for feral hogs because, you know, they crap all over everything, destroy the ecosystem. So there'll be people like that, and, you know, you can always detect them because they always leave fatter than when they came with some of the things you needed to do your work. And that's why it's so important that you stay together and that you value what you know over experts that will tell you to do something else. And you want to keep the people most impacted by this storm from being victims of those folks as well. So you're creating essentially a future for this region out of your own collective imaginations. In Rolling Fork also, I saw this sign, and it was a reminder of this poem that I deeply love. And it says, our first task in approaching people, culture, another religion, take off our shoes, for the place is holy. Else we find ourselves treading on people's dreams. More serious still, we may forget that God was there before we arrived. There's a certain sacred element to these places destroyed by disasters. And taking off our shoes means I don't assume that I know what you ought to have. I trust that you do. And that I don't try to scrap what you value. And I don't try to impose solutions on you that don't fit you. So, and I listen twice, help once, really helpful. There is no such thing as a single sector recovery. All recoveries are built on a three-legged stool. And that public-private philanthropic alliance, however loose, fraught, challenging, and difficult, is the way that the resources and solutions and execution of those is accomplished. So all of you that serve in some way as connective tissue between these three legs, you have enormous value in this. And if you can maintain respect, all of you, for each sector and allow it to do what it does best while you do what you do best in your own sector, you're going to need that. That's the... that's a must. Don't allow bad stories to get told about any one sector over another. I've seen so far, first I've seen a philanthropic sector, as very emblematic, the Community Foundation, the steps they've taken and the sequence in which they're taking them. If Elena and I were to just write an outline of how you ought to do it, it looks like that. In the business sector in the Hill Country is struggling. They're trying to figure out where are the points of help and what are the steps that we need to take going forward. And the help from business sectors elsewhere is going to come, and that's going to be very useful. But just remember that there is a useful sequence, starting with individuals and families and communities and homes, rebuilds a tax base and reestablishes residency, provides workers. It's essential. And then the public sector's role, you've got to advocate unrelentingly for yourselves if you're to seek and get the state and federal resources that you need for the things that no individual organization can do here. This one's really tough. I think I'm going to get to, I want to just emphasize, everywhere I've worked, there's a community telling a story about another community that got everything while they got nothing. Those are always myths. So you have to continue to believe there's enough to go around that you can somehow craft from what you have the solutions you need. They did it in Germany. All of the outpouring of help in Germany was so great for Syrians. They had everything that everyone coming there, all 1 million people, needed. So then they began shipping it to camps in other parts of the world. We have enough. So you think we have a distribution challenge. We don't have a shortage. And in Australia, revamped their ordinances and policies so that you could convert a portion of your home to make it a residence for someone who didn't have one because they couldn't build housing fast enough. So there are all kinds of solutions built on what we have. And now you're at this inception point where you have to decide what you recreate versus what you create anew. And trust yourselves. You have the wisdom, you have the knowledge of the place to do it. So this is where we land. When we're all home again. When we all recognize the place that we're in and the place we're in recognizes us. We can earn, learn, belong in this place. We're no longer experiencing that loss of self that attends the chaos of disaster. We can proudly say, this is my home, this is where I live, this is my community. We have a sense of solidarity and we understand our journey well enough we can tell others. This is where you're headed. You'll get there. So this is me thanking hundreds and hundreds of people and communities and cities and places in the world that shared their stories with me so I can share them with you. And my sole intention is to encourage you, to affirm you, and I really hope this has been helpful. Thank you for allowing me to be here, Austin. Appreciate it. And thanks to all of you for the work you're doing and your attention today.
So we have a few minutes for some questions with Angela. But before we do that, I'd love everybody to just take a deep breath. It was a lot. Okay, and with that, if you have a question you'd like to ask, please raise your hand. We're actually going to pass the mic. Alina's going to pass, and we'll go from there.
So I'm very curious whether any of those stages and their descriptions, did you find and thought, yes, that's where I am, this is where we are? Oh, all of them at once?
All of them, yeah. I've been every. It's too close.
Doesn't have to be a question. If there's a reaction you want to share.
Reality is on the ground.
Just that reality is on the ground, not in the headlines. That was big. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you get to tell your own story. So the two of you, actually, thank you, you're the best of audience members. You both have very expressive faces that are quite encouraging to a speaker. So would you share any reactions? Would you be willing?
I just feel like everything hit home to a degree that I haven't been able to express yet, and I just know everybody in this room has been feeling a certain way, and it just feels kind of comforting to know that we're all in this together, and just hearing it from your perspective as well, it seems hopeful. So just thanks for being here and doing this.
Any other questions or remarks?
I'd like to thank you, but I'm just covering you.
Similar to all of you. It's quite attentive. What else? What else is in the room? Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Oh no, I'm gonna go for you. Big room. I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit more about storytelling and creativity and resilience and what you've seen work well in other communities.
So, part of what disasters do is sort of rip us from our normal world. So, most of us are surrounded every day by a sort of benign house of mirrors. I mean, all the people around us who know us, affirm us, say, how was your weekend? How's your daughter? You know, how's the diet going? You know, and then disaster, it's all gone. Even the little objects that remind us of who we are, the routines. So there's a sort of ripping away of identity. And we don't realize how much of who we are is outsourced to our surroundings until our surroundings, everything is gone. So what we see through creativity and art and music, especially art and music, is that we can tap into that, who we are, very quickly. There's a collection of songs that I can hear, and I'm immediately reminded of all my roots and all my Cajun faith, all of it. It comes back, and I have this sort of core, like, yeah. And so when, in all places, you know, I've heard, like, knuckleheads. I try to keep that the meanest thing I say about people, knucklehead. I've heard knuckleheads say, well, there's just no culture there. Yes, there is culture everywhere. That's the regular practice. Those are the things we normally do, the images that remind us of who we are. So every time in Galveston I saw another mural go up, reminding people in Galveston of Galveston prior to IE. You know, that was hope for everyone. And it's so inexpensive and fast. So that's a new house of mirrors reminding us who we are. Because the rest takes a really long time. Yeah. Was that it?
Good morning. My name is Brenda Hughes, and I'm Place 4 City Council for Kerrville and Mayor Pro Tem. And I actually, through this, just attended my very first counseling session. So thank you for that. And I have a funny little story because I had to attend an event this weekend and I had to speak. And so I practiced my speech for a week with my husband. And every time I got to a certain point in my speech, I would break down. And so I went to this event this weekend and I was like, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. And when I got up there and did my speech, somehow, I guess through the grace of God, I skipped over that whole paragraph that made me cry and read word for word the speech, but for some reason that paragraph was not there, at least in my own mind, and I did not recite it. But what you taught me today is that it is okay to cry. So thank you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's okay to cry. Crying really comes from that deep place of caring. And gratitude and grief go hand in hand. So, what else?
I'm struggling to get up just a minute.
Well, Brenda, come to New Hope Counseling and we'll continue to help you. Brenda Fudge with New Hope Counseling, and I just have to say that I'm very grateful. Our community, I think the strength base was already there in place. We have the Kerr County Interagency Network, and we have several collaborative groups that were already meeting and planning for us in the future. We just have to now take that step back and go to some alternate plans, Plan B, but we can do it because the strength and resiliency is here. Thank you for reinforcing us today in that.
You're welcome.
Let's see, anybody else? Looking for hands. Oh, great. Brittany?
Hi, I'm Brittany Lehman. I'm a case manager. Hi. I would just like to say the thing that really struck me was when you said it, that we can hear it.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of people ask us as case managers, like, how do you do this every day? You hear all the stories and they're heavy and they're hard, but that is how we feel, you know? If they lived it, we can hear it.
Yes.
And we're grateful to stay in that space. So thank you for those words to put in my head every time somebody asks.
Thank you.
All right, I see a hand.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Carmen DeVille. I'm also a case manager. My question is, how do you deal with empathy control in these situations? Because I feel like a lot of the time, a lot of the case managers, we struggle with urgency and grief and sadness of wanting things to be moving quickly, and you can't imagine, you know, what these people have been going through, and so there's this pressure to, you know, perform and respond and care, and but there has to be a measurement there, or you know, you'll burn out, or maybe not do it in the correct way. So my question is how do you deal with, I guess you could call it empathy distress or just empathy in general in these situations when it's so broad?
So, so are you referring to your own distress at hearing these difficult stories?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. So, one thing, if I'm in trouble, one thing I really need from you as a case manager is the sense that you absolutely believe I can navigate this. Because if your empathy leads you to imply in any way that this is just too much for any human being to hold, then I start to drown. Because this person who should know, I think, what this looks like seems overwhelmed. So, and when you're a deeply empathetic person, you know, my mom, who you might have concluded by the example I gave, is not. But you definitely do want her on your team, because she will get shit done. But if you're a deeply empathetic person, you're gonna, my mom says about me, I know how everyone in the room feels before they do. So this can make you good at case management as long as you treat what you know as information. And that's a really subtle thing, and I can talk with you more about it, but it's like what's landing here in your gut is this person is starting to feel despair. Meaning this is, I'll never get out of this will never work, this will never get better, this will always be, I'm going to lose everything and I'll never get any part of it back. So you cannot go there with them. You don't go with them. You observe it and you feed it back and you tell them, what I see here, you're starting to think this will never get better. And then, so you have to treat it as information. Feeling their feelings is, as laudable as it sounds, is not helpful. And I think absolutely centering, one of the things as we used to practice a lot when we did case management called appreciative inquiry. So one of the most helpful questions I can be asked if I'm in deep trouble is the last time, you're like, take me back to a time in your life when you experienced something so difficult you didn't know if you were going to happen. Have that person tell the story of how they got out of that. Who did they rely on? Who could they count on? Who did they turn to for help? What beliefs did they hold saved them? When they're reliving, they're being reminded then of what they already know about how to get out of hell. So those are practical ways, and I'm happy to talk more about that. Those are really good questions because, and then let me speak to urgency. Urgency is just your desire for everyone to stop feeling all this pain. Urgency is not some mandate. It isn't some intuition from the divine driving. Urgency, you know, every time you feel a sense of urgency and we have to hurry, if there's no blood on the floor, there's a pretty good chance that's just a cover for trying to get away from these bad feelings as quickly as possible. So we're not hurrying. You know, there's no such thing as a rushed recovery, individual, community, city. So when you feel that urgency, just know it's everyone just wanting to get away from the pain. And pausing, or letting it happen, and talking through what have we done in the past when we face the unthinkable. You know, it helps me always, which is a very kind of macro level. You know, we're all here. The only reason you're here is because something like 10 generations of people survived war and genocide and plague and every form of threat in the world to birth you. So in us is the instinct and even deep wisdom about how we go on after difficult situations. You want to invite people that you're working with to call forth that which they already know, and if they themselves haven't, that's already lived through unthinkable situations. You know, people, I was asked a lot because I do work both in immigrant displaced communities and also disaster. And they're like, why do immigrants seem to do it better? Well, they don't do it better, they've just been there before. They've already started over with nothing, more than once sometimes. So it's calling forth and inviting people to think about how that works and what they bring to the table from their own knowledge and their own families. This also grounds them in, you know, what matters. Was that helpful?
Yes, thank you so much.
Such a good question. Yeah. I think we're out of time.
I think we're out of time.
I'm gonna hang around today just in case you want to have any kind of conversation at all, because, you know, I really live for this, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela. Appreciate you. All right, we're actually going to take a quick break right now. So if you have a burning question for Angela, now's a good time. We're going to come back at 10:55, and we'll meet back in here, and we're going to move into a vision for recovery. All right, see you in 15.